David Fowley of Keeping It Real. It's been too long since we talked about movies just one on one. It's been a
Yeah,
few months. Yeah, it's
right.
good. But and we're coming together to talk about a pretty special film called Relative,
Mhm.
directed by Chicago's very own Michael Glover Smith, written and directed, and just about everything. This guy's is he does it all. But the movie premieres tonight in Chicago. Well, I guess it kind of opens. It had a premiere at the Music Box the other
Right.
night, but now it's kind of blowing up in places, and there's gonna be different screenings going on throughout Chicago, and we're gonna be part of some of those happening next week, in fact. But we'll get to that. This is what you call a tease for something we'll talk about towards the end of the show. So I want to kick off by saying the last time we talked about a Michael Smith film, we did not agree on it. Really, I was really kind of down on his last movie, Rendezvous in Chicago, which was a disappointment to me because I was very high on his earlier films, Cool Apocalypse and Mercury in Retrograde. So when it came time to watch his new film, I was kind of hesitant. But I got to say, this is right up there. I think, not to say that he's made a comeback, because all of this was in my own head as far as my opinion of that last film, which I
Right.
know a lot of people really dug. But this is a great reminder, I think, of why I think Michael is so kind of special and important to the Chicago film scene. But set this up for me. What is Relative? And yeah, just what is Relative?
Okay. So Relative is like many of Michael's movies, a Chicago-based movie. It takes place, you know, today, modern day, and it revolves around a family. Hence the title. Of course, the title could mean a lot of different things, and again, it could be applied towards a lot of different things in this story. But basically, revolves around um, potential or wannabe empty nesters, and that's the Frank, Karen and David Frank, played by Wendy Roby and Francis Guinan. Fantastic actors. They are the matriarch and patriarch of this family. They have children, and some of the children are still at home. One of them is on their way out, and that's the reason why all the children are coming back to the nest, because Benji, the youngest, Cameron Roberts, is graduating from Loyola, and they're having a get together. They're calling all the children, adult children, back, and for a kind of like a reunion and a party and a celebratory event. There will be some definitely a surprise announcement. There will be some revelations, and as we go along, like a lot of Michael's movies, this is a very human story that's relatable, and you'll start to see some of the children still dealing with things, and the parents trying to navigate how to help them and how to also give them their own selves some breathing room in this thing we called life. So I thought he navigates this story. It's a great ensemble, probably one of his best, and I think he navigates this story really, really well. It has a great balance to it, and I think he gives enough for each character to do something on screen, and so that's a good kind of summary. We could talk more about as we go along.
Yeah, and it's kind of an odd position because usually you and I talk spoilers. We kind of get deep
Sure.
into movies. I want to talk about the movie, but I don't want to get into necessarily everything. So
Uh-huh.
if you find me straying into something, and I'll keep you in check
I'll
too.
just go.
That yes, there you go. Um, but yeah, because I think audiences really need to experience
Yeah.
this and see some of the really good surprises that are in store for them. So I don't want to ruin that.
Yeah.
Um, but I do want to talk about the evolution of Michael Smith as a storyteller, because all of his films revolve around relationships. And I noticed, Cool Apocalypse was essentially about, just a couple of couples. And then Mercury in Retrograde was, more couples at various stages in their relationships. And now this, Rendezvous in Chicago was also about relationships. They're more like vignettes, like a series of short films. This is continuing the idea of one long narrative, and blowing up this idea. You kind of wonder, where can you go? You're talking about couples in different stages of your relationships. That's fine for one or two movies, but how far can you really push that? Well, what happens when you have couples in different stages of relationships who are part of and satelliting around one giant family?
Right.
How does that family dynamic play into the success or quote unquote failure or problems and triumphs of these individual relationships? I think it's a really cool idea. We've seen a lot of, a day in the life of 24 hours or a weekend of, different people coming together, everything from The Big Chill to, frankly, Mercury in retrograde. But this one feels like it's digging into new territory. And my only criticism really is, I feel like this could have been twice as long. There are some things that we start to find out about people, like, oh, I want to find out what these folks do when they all go back home from this reunion.
Right. I mean, I could see it as almost like 3 episodes in a way, or something like that. I did feel like right from the start, when we are introduced to Emily Leip's character, I forget her name, but
Norma.
Norma. Yeah.
There's folks. There's a lot of characters in this movie.
Keep track
so
of.
Yeah, we're going to be looking off of our screens,
notes,
probably.
Yeah. It just, and it's probably because of her great performance too, but there's just a lot it feels right away that's kind of unsaid. We're introduced to her as she's leaving, saying goodbye to her family, and I think in Iowa, and on her way to Rogers Park. But that a lot of that is on during the opening credits, but even then, partly due to her performance, of course, there just seems like there's a lot under the surface going on, and she's not the only one. I think I will be blunt and frank that I think that the women are the standout performances in this movie, and I just feel like there's and I think Kevin Roberts plays Benji's great and everything, but and they're all good, but there's something about the women in this movie that just kind of stand out, and I feel like they are the ones who kind of convey this idea that there's a lot more underneath the surface, and a lot more that's going kind of unsaid, and I think that is right away, that's quite absorbing and quite relatable to people, because we often, especially with family, we wind up not saying things that we really like to, because maybe we don't want to hurt our siblings' feelings or our parents' feelings, or we just don't want to get into it.
Well, and to that point, open ourselves up to attacks, because I'm sure there are people on the other side of that who are like, well, since we're going there,
Yeah, oh, it's so true. And how often is it, and this is what I gathered in that opening scene, is how often is it when you are driving on your way to a family member's whatever occasion, graduation, wedding, funeral, whatever, do you find yourself going, okay, here's what I don't want to talk about, here's what I don't want to bring up, and it's just, are you going to slide into that old shirt that your family's familiar with, or are you going to just try and be who you are? Are they going to treat you as the way they knew you when you were living under their roof? And by they, I mean the parents, the siblings, and everything. Or are you going to be able to, not necessarily put your foot down, but stand up for yourself and say, well, thanks for mentioning that, but I've changed since then, and it's hard to do, because again, maybe there's a little bit of people pleasing, and maybe you're trying to avoid confrontation or drama, but I think a lot of times as a family member, going back to the nest can be kind of challenging.
And we're talking about Norma. She is the one character, and I've only watched the film once, and I got to go back and watch it again, because I felt a different way at the beginning of it than I did by the end. By the end, I was just like kind of devastated in a good way. It was a really emotional film.
Yeah.
But I got the feeling that the Norma character almost got short shrift in terms of what we know about her situation coming into the reunion versus coming out. I feel like
Mhm.
everyone else got more of a full arc, but without getting too much into it, I kind of feel like that's the point.
Yeah.
Uh, like everyone kind of comes to this reunion with their baggage, and we sort of expect that things are going to work out. But as you're kind of mentioning, relationships, especially with family, are kind of sloppy and they don't always have clean beginnings, middles, and ends. So when we see her go back home, we're kind of like, well, what exactly is she going back into? I'm not quite sure. I feel like she knows, but the family was so concerned with these more overt, overstated dramas that
Yeah.
hers kind of got, we'll have to deal with that on a different weekend.
Yeah, initially that kind of gray area kind of bothered me, but then like you, I kind of came to the realization that like, look, with all these characters, we can't have them all, just kind of close up on tidy notes at the end. And I think, you know, the way Norma's storyline is written is kind of a lot more true to life than it is. I mean, you show up, and I could almost see her as she's leaving, going back to home, like, phew, well, at least they didn't get too much into me in my life. It's like all the focus was on everybody else, and that's kind of how it is. And again, I didn't expect it to get all tidy for everybody, and it doesn't really get necessarily tidy. It just seems like as the film ends, it's not like anything's left hanging, but you realize, like you said, this could be longer. You realize, okay, this, you know, these groups of people have some things to work on, and they're all in a pretty much a good place as the film ends, but they have some things to work on, and that's again natural to life. That's how it is.
Yeah. And I'm not saying it's unearned. I was just very surprised by the way that this film ended. The relationship between the two brothers, Rod, who's living in the basement, his parents' basement, even though he's probably in his approaching 40 at least. He never kind of got over a breakup, and he's got some other issues that we come to find out later in the film. And then his youngest, Benji, the one who's graduating, who's kind of, they get into it because Benji sees Rod as a drag on his parents. Like, I'm getting ready to move out. Why don't you, kind of thing? Like, it's
Mm-hmm.
life isn't that hard to figure out. There's a really chilling confrontation between the two of them on the street at night. But Benji is down on the ground, like on the sidewalk, yelling up at Rod, who's kind of sneaking a smoke outside of his window on a balcony. And it's a tense exchange. And I wondered, like, because as I mentioned, we've seen other movies kind of like this, family and relationship dynamic movies. And when you have a scene like that, usually it means that later they're going to come to like physical blows. It's not just going
Yeah.
to be, a
Yeah.
verbal exchange. But this movie, I think, finds a kind of a smart way around that. The outcasts of the reunion, who not only include Rod, but also the Luce character, played by Melissa Dupre, who is the wife of one of the other daughters. The outcasts kind of find each other at a spot in the basement,
Yeah,
right?
and her name's actually Luce, Luce. It's not like she's a loose character.
Right. Yeah. It's Luce. It's Luce. It's Lucia or
Yeah.
Lucia, I think, but they call
Just
her Luce. I thought it
just
was
wanted to clarify that.
right. Thank you. Yes. I thought it was, I kept going thinking it was Luz, like Luz, but
Okay.
no, but
Yeah.
yeah. So, and we can kind of talk about some of these other
Yeah.
family members here. The great Claire Cooney, who's sort of a staple of Michael Smith's productions, and she's a great filmmaker in her own right and an actress.
And
And
she
we
also
talked to her. Yeah,
and she also cast this movie.
yeah.
Yeah.
She plays
Yvonne.
Yvonne, who again, the names of this movie are so interesting. I kept thinking of as Yvonne with a Y, but it's Yvonne with an E, and it's just like a little thing, but it's a nice little bit of spice
Yeah.
and a little flavoring.
Yeah.
But she's in a relationship with Luce, and they're having trouble. They've got a young daughter. assume is an adopted daughter. They don't really get into it, but there's talk about Yvonne having been in the hospital recently. I'm going to be tiptoeing around
Yeah.
this aspect of it, but it's a relationship that is very loving but very troubled, and troubled in a way that, again, we don't see a lot of this specific kind of issue that they're dealing with in movies. So it's nice to kind of explore that.
No, really. I mean, in just a few scenes we get in the introduction of that couple, that specific couple, there's enough information given that we catch up with them, and we understand what's going on. And but at the same time, there's like, oh well, there's some history here that we don't know about, and I didn't mind that, but I thought it was pretty cleverly written, that introductory scene, to just like, okay, I understand what's going on here, because it's kind of it's more of a relationship thing that we can relate to, their conversation that they're having like in bed together. And there's also there's this kind of recognizable dread of getting back, traveling back to the family home in Rogers Park for the reunion, for some specific reasons which we won't get into. But yeah, I thought that was a great introduction. I mean, I thought they do a amazing job. They're a believable couple together, and I think yeah, the way the Claire handles some heavy subject matter there, is and the way Michael writes it is I think really well done.
Yeah. It's a weird thing, because I don't want to tell stories out of school, but I don't, as far as I know, Michael doesn't have any kids.
No.
But he is married, and like everyone else, he's got a family of some kind. I was very struck by how insightful the screenplay was in terms of the way parents relate to their kids, and the way siblings relate to each other, sort of from that parental familial lens, even though he doesn't have that firsthand knowledge, which makes me wonder, is it that easy to write, or is it just that universal kind of a sentiment as far as understanding kids?
Well, I think it's probably coming from, I feel he's always been a very observant director, meaning observant of others, of life and the people around him, and he brings that to his screenplays.
Yeah.
But I think that this particular script feels like there's a lot more of him and his marriage, his wife, going on here, included in here, in a lot of different areas. And I mean, I'll eventually talk to him about it, but yeah, you know how it is. It's like between even the time before you have kids, between you and your wife, you have most likely enough life experience and history in your own families to develop a screenplay, and come up with familial situations that are kind of universal. So, and then of course you see other people having kids, and that other people could be other family members, and a lot of that is often quite universal and relatable. The kind of the kind of life drama that can come with raising kids, being a parent, and especially when the parental units are not working it out, or are not together on the same page.
Well, it's the thing that intrigued me the most, and I don't know if this was an actorly choice or if this was in the direction of the screenplay, but it's the specificity of some of the little details. The one that springs to mind is very late in the film, Wendy Robbie's character, Karen, the matriarch, is having a kind of a sit down with Yvonne.
Yeah.
They've both just come back from there's a triple header of revelations late in the movie, and these two kind of pair off and go talk about some things. And when they're sort of pouring their hearts out to each other and kind of revealing even more surprises to themselves and to us, at one point, Karen, as the mother, kind of runs her fingers through Yvonne's hair in a very kind of a loving way, almost like I could just it's the same way I am with my own, young kids, when they've got a problem, or you're just sitting on the couch hanging out and you feel very affectionate. You want to just reach out and touch them. It's not like a hug, it's different. It's like there's something very parental about that particular kind of caress, which is something that I don't think I've seen a lot in kind of family dramas like this. There's tend to be so focused on the dialogue or the big P performance that taking the time out to get that little stroke that I think kind of says everything in one move.
Yeah, and when there's so many good little subtleties and nuances there in that scene, but also in these relationships in this movie. Yeah, I definitely felt that, kind of like that whole interaction where they even like leave the house and go for a little bit of run just to release, stress and everything. um I feel like that sequence will be kind of like burned in my brain, towards the end of the year, as some of the best scenes that I'll probably see this year. That whole sequence of just like leaving the home, coming back, laying on the grass, having a conversation, having that conversation indoors as well, and just there's a lot of um, vulnerability, openness, and care between the two of them. And you see, you know, you see a mother inviting the daughter to open up herself, yet she wouldn't be able to do that if it wasn't for the mother opening up the door to say,
Mhm.
"Hey, I'm here. I see you. I understand," kind of thing. It's really beautiful.
Yeah, and Karen is holding on to some stuff that I think is a surprise to, I would imagine, her entire family, because if Yvonne doesn't know kind of what she shares, I imagine the other kids don't, or at least they're not
Right.
letting on. And that kind of mirrors, I think, what we see with Norma at the end of the film, as I kind of alluded to. There's she's not making a big deal about, why didn't we get to talk about what I really wanted to talk about this weekend? She just kind of kept it bottled up. That sequence where the mom and daughter go for a jog, I wondered if that was an in joke on Michael's part
For a
to
runner.
for Claire's short film Runner, which is great because there's actually another, I'll call it a gag, but an in joke earlier. Benji is in his last day of film class, and up on the slides on the projector, there was they're talking about the last movies they're going to look at. A curriculum one was called Mercy's Girl from
Yep.
2018, and
Hmm.
that was actually Emily Lape's film
Yeah,
that
great
she was
movie.
in. Yeah, I haven't seen it. I got to do my homework for next week.
I actually caught up with it this year because of this movie.
Oh yeah.
And yeah, I was reminded of it. I'm like, oh yeah, that's one of those movies I need to get around to, and I did, and it's quite beautiful. Um, did you notice that Michael is in this movie?
I running down the steps with
Yeah.
I went back and I Zapruder filmed the hell out of that moment. I rewound like 5 times. I'm like, is that no? Yep. Yep. I think that's him. It's a very Hitchcock moment, and I wonder if it
Mhm,
was just the DP like capturing the
mhm.
getting the coverage, and then like Michael just happened to be in the shot. But yeah, it was so Hitchcock. It was
Yeah,
funny.
yeah. I want to go back a little bit to that brother argument on the exterior sequence there, the brother argument on the at night. Like initially, I wasn't sure if it really worked for me because maybe of the way it was filmed or anything, but I, seeing the movie more than twice now, it still did. It wound up actually working for me just because of the, like you said, it's two brothers who aren't wrong and aren't right about the situation. And I think both actors and both actors and Michael really get the that point, both points across really well, and neither of them are really at a place where they can sit down and have a functional conversation. It's all kind of like emotion and a lot of hurt and a lot of kind of on Benji's part, there's a kind of like a lack of understanding on where his brother's at. And it's an exterior look at like, well, why, like you said, why can't he move on? Why is,
Well,
he's still at home.
but it is one of those things. And to your point about neither being right or wrong, I mean, they both are right and wrong,
Yeah.
but it's a matter of experience. Because even if Rod were to sit down and as far as Rod's disposition, I'm going to pull over for a second.
Yeah.
He is kind of unlikable from frame one. We get a lot of visual information of him. He's swearing at his Xbox down in his parents' basement. He's chewing out his parents. He's ungrateful. And then over the course of the movie, we find out, oh, he hasn't gotten over a bad breakup. Oh, there's this other complication in terms of that relationship. See how I'm jumping around this minefield of spoilers? And then, oh, there's even another complication which might explain or help to explain specifically why he's acting the way that he is. But even if he were to sit down and have a heart-to-heart with Benji about this and explain why he is this starry-eyed 18-year-old kid who's got a job lined up as a digital cartographer at Google, he's in for a world, like things aren't always going to look up. Benji would not even understand that because he's so full of life and possibility that you can't understand the heartbreak that Rod has gone through unless you experience it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And Rod is so far gone down his path that he probably can't even remember a time when optimism was in his vocabulary.
Yeah. And I would say there's life experience kind of hits the nose on its head. There's a lot more going on with Rod than there is Benji. Let's just say.
Yeah.
Because for a lot of reasons, but you definitely feel the weight. And it's interesting because of the position of the conversation, because, Rod's high up, Benji's low. And where do you think in general, like, the spotlight of that whole scene would be? I mean, typically you're going to notice somebody, if you're walking down the street and the sidewalk, you're going to notice somebody who's out hanging out smoking on a balcony or something. Either they're, you smell it or they're making noise or whatever. And that's kind of like a spotlight, in a way of like an unintentional one on Rod's part, because he's usually in the basement, not talking to anybody. But the one time he kind of makes himself known to the world, he kind of just wants also to be left alone and be isolated and just smoke, primarily weed, I believe. That then boom, Benji comes along, is like, hey, and so it is kind of an uncomfortable moment for Rod, and he's, typically on the defense. And so there's not really a moment like for Benji, because of his, lack of life experience. There's not really a night, like a bulb that goes off in Benji's head saying, you know what, I'm going to table this for later and have actually a sit down conversation, maybe take Rod out for coffee or something. He's just not he's not in that place in life,
Well, especially because he meets, one of the complications this weekend is he meets a girl named Hecla, who we'll get to in a second. But there's something much like my theory about Norma's character and why we don't get the full kind of arc of, a fully fleshed out character arc there. And again, that's not a criticism.
Yeah.
I wonder if Michael in the screenplay has planted the seeds for Benji's crisis very early on, because we don't see him graduating, or we don't see his last class of the year as, geography class or digital cartography, kind of specialized training. It's a film class. And his teacher makes a point to go out of her way to talk to him about it. Like, you've got a real talent. I love the way that you write and the way that you think about things. So you really should do something with that. And he's like, well, I'm going off to Google because I'm going to go do this map thing. And it's a great job and a great opportunity. We come, when he's explaining how he got into digital cartography, he said he had always been fascinated by geography and that kind of stuff. But he also has a passion for writing about film, which implies sort of an artistic, creative flourish, which he's probably not going to be able to fulfill as a digital cartographer. So, because Google is not necessarily known for, hey, we're churning out, great artists and philosophers and film critics. So I wonder if later on down the line, his conflict might be, well, yeah, I'm really comfortable at this job, making a ton of money, but I've let my creative side lapse.
Right.
And if he ends up with Hecla, that could be a big problem because she is the definition of an artistic free spirit.
Oh yeah, she's a force of nature, played by Elizabeth Stam, and you know, I could see a lot of people saying, "Oh, another manic pixie dream girl," whatever. But no, I don't agree with that. I think that she's just, I've met people like Hecla, and um, there's they're just kind of, they have a lot of people drawn to them.
Mhm.
For whatever, I mean, for a lot of reasons. She's very outgoing. She's um, very even in the conversation that they're having when they first meet, it's not like she's talking all about herself. She's asking questions about Benji, and yes, it is a kind of meet cute little, flirting on both ends, but there's some kind of sparkle about her that to me, and it has to do with the performance mainly and somewhat with the writing, but there is a bit of a sparkle there that's just like, you could tell Benji and the viewer, you and I, are like, you can't let this go. You got to pursue this. This is just, it just seems too good to be true. And just because she seems to stand out of not necessarily all the other characters we've met so far, but just as a person, she's somebody who seems to be like, standing out, and who's very engaging and very present, very confident in who she is. Not overly confident. You could tell that just there's some things that she knows she probably needs to work on, but she's an actress, so she could be putting this all on too, but she still seems very real.
She does, and she can deliver an Oscar Wilde monologue like nobody's business.
Right.
The thing, I'm happily married,
mm-hmm.
but I fell instantly in love with this character.
Mm-hmm.
I know Netflix, they just announced, or they just had the release date for their Sandman series.
Mm-hmm.
But I was thinking to myself, if Elizabeth Stam had been in the auditions for Death, because that was the whole point of that character from the Sandman mythos, was Death is the character who delivers you to the afterlife, and you fall instantly in love with her so that you essentially be happy with going with her on this journey to the other side.
So you don't mind the journey.
Right. But she reminded me, partially it's the writing, but a lot of it's the performance. You said, I understand the manic pixie dream girl thing, but that tends to come with baggage. It's like the person who's the muse, and she's all bubbly and impossibly cool, but she's also kind of damaged and fucked up. And we see, later on, she's having some kind of a breakdown or whatever. That's not the case here. And again, it's because it's a snapshot. It's one day of a weekend.
Right.
So we don't know if those problems are coming necessarily, but just I think it might be the last scene we see of her walking home alone at night, going back to her place. And she just seems so full of love. Like she's met this great guy, so she believes, and his family, and they're all kind of messed up, but they accepted her, and she really likes, it's the feeling that when you go to a party and you come away having met a lot of really cool people that you hope are going to be friends forever.
Yeah.
That just in that 10 seconds we see of her walking, and the music and the expression on her face, it's all there. It's so, as we've said before, real.
Yeah. I mean, she's golden, through and through. And Benji does realize it right away. And he can't stop thinking of her. And he's not really crazy or enthused about this whole party that's being thrown for him. So she is his safety net, and he offers, hey, I want to invite you to this party that my family is throwing for me. So you'll basically be going to, the only person you'll be knowing is me,
Well, it's not even as neat as that, because he sneaks out of the party to go, like, after graduation, there's kind of a lull before everyone shows up, and he sneaks out to go meet her. And when he keeps getting texted by his family, like, where the hell are you?
Where are you?
He's like, well, I kind of got this. My folks are throwing this party for me. She's like, well, you have to
now?
Go. Yeah. She's like, you have to go. And then he kind of drags her along. And that's, again, it's cute, but it's also it says a lot about, her character,
Mhm.
that even if she wasn't expecting to be invited, she says, your family came from different states to see you graduate. A different character would have been like, sounds lame. Let's go, smoke up and get a motel.
Or it could say a lot, this woman could say, it could tell her a lot about him, like, wait, you're hanging out with me and you're trying to avoid your family, and then you want to invite me over. It's like, I don't want to get involved in all this. But then she's just like, yeah, okay. The fact that she goes along with it kind of just reinforces who she is when we first meet her. It's like, yeah, this is somebody special here.
There's also another moment, and I want to believe in the sincerity of these characters, but when they show up to the party and they get introduced to the couple who's like the family friend.
Mm-hmm. Isn't that his brother, the dad's brother? It could be.
Maybe.
I don't know.
I don't know if they actually established that. I just know they call each other Fat Boy or Fat Man or something like that.
Fat Boy, yeah.
Yeah, but when Hecla is introduced to the wife or the girlfriend, I guess, she's like, "Oh, it was so great to see you again." She's like, "Oh, we've never met." And she's like, "Oh, I thought you were the girl we met at last year's party."
I've had that happen before. Yeah.
Well, it just made me wonder, like, is Benji the kind of guy? Was this just a friend that he brought last time? Or does he fall in love so easily? And is that going to be a red flag for the future?
Or is this his thing? He brings over his girlfriend to these family events.
He's got a thing for blonde, blonde actresses or something.
Yeah.
But again, these are possibilities of where a story could go. And I think it's a testament to just drop these little bits of information and let us kind of imagine instead of having it all spoon-fed. The one dead end that kind of ended up being a gag, but I thought was going to be bigger to the story, was the two little kids at the party end up down in the basement watching television. And there's something very significant about what's on that TV. It turns out it's just kind of a joke, but I thought that they're going to find some information that was going to lead to a big fight.
Yeah.
I'm kind of glad they left it where they,
that would have been just too much, I think.
Yeah.
What did you feel about the relationship of the parents and how that was portrayed?
Talking about David and Karen. I thought it was really good. It's hard to say because it's a loving relationship. You can tell that they've been through kind of a lot together, especially with these kids. But I was just glad to see, and I guess this will be a spoiler, things are pretty much okay by the end. It's not like everyone's getting divorced and throwing bottles at each other or anything, but it's a sweet kind of relationship. And I think what we find out about Karen later on in the movie helps inform David's character without making a big deal about it.
There's a scene early on that kind of informed me, their relationship. And he is retired and she still works at the library. It's a labor of love, and there's a great scene in the library in the front desk that is just great too. And I don't know if you caught this or remember this, but she's leaving for work, going down the front steps. He's sitting, maybe reading a book, I think in the front porch, and they say goodbye, and he says, "I love you." And she pauses, kind of looks at him and keeps on going. Doesn't say it back. And I kind of love that because she loves him, right? Yes, I gathered that. But it made me wonder, okay, well, why didn't she say it back? Is there something, is it just that day? Is there something going on? And I know that they have years behind them, and it seemed very, again, I'll use the word realistic, but it just seems so like authentic that, like, yes, you could say sometimes couples don't have to say it, who've been together forever. And maybe you could also say, well, sometimes at that point in the day, they don't want to say it, maybe there's something going on, I kind of loved it.
I had forgotten about that moment, but I remember in the moment watching it, I was like, this is going to come back. Like, this means this is, as you mentioned, informing us about something about their relationship. And it doesn't really, I mean, I know, to your point, you don't always have to say it.
Yeah.
But usually that applies to two people. Like, we're together, we love each other, but we don't have to say it. But it's a little different when one person says it and the other doesn't. And I felt, we don't really come back to it, we don't dwell on it, but in that moment I felt kind of what David might have been thinking on some level, because with my own two boys, I've got one who's very outwardly affectionate, and I say I love you, and he's like, I love you, Daddy. And then the other one, I say I love you, and I either get some kind of like a snarky, kind of like a jokey response, or nothing.
Yeah.
And
I
really,
have one child and I get that.
But the thing is, and this is all about me and my head problems, as demonstrated in our rendezvous in Chicago conversation. It hurts. I mean, I understand that he loves me, but it's that feeling of putting it out there and not hearing it back. You always wonder, is something wrong?
Yeah,
and even if there's nothing wrong, is there something big W wrong?
Yeah. It's probably a poor equivalent, but in that moment, it's almost like the equivalent of, putting your hand up for a high five and the person next to you doesn't give it to you, It's like, left me hanging.
I'd settle for a Han Solo, I know, at that point, Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know if Michael's not a big fan of Star Wars, so I don't know if he'd do that. So
he's a big fan of Twin Peaks, and I gotta say, I guess it was quite a coup to get Wendy Roby in here. I have never seen Twin Peaks, and this is the part where Michael turns off the podcast and disinvites me from hosting the screening next week.
He's on his way to your home and dropping off the Blu-rays.
Probably. It's an intervention, but no, I don't really know her. I think she's been in other things that I've seen, but I don't remember her as
Wes Craven's People Under the Stairs.
Yeah, I saw that 30 years ago, and I don't remember anything about that movie except there are people under the stairs. But no, she's great in it. I have no idea how representative this is of like the other stuff she's done. But as far as her performance playing, an almost retired Rogers Park, mom, I think she and Guinan did a great job together.
Yeah, they were really fantastic, and that their two performances show life experience in character and off screen. It's those are two veteran actors right there that are really comfortable in their own skin and in their characters. So it just shows, and I really liked it, and I really feel like I could totally be projecting here, but I could see that, like, Michael is writing this as almost to say, like, in the future, this is how me and my wife will be. It's like, minus the kids, I don't know. But I could see that kind of, strong connection between the two of them. Yeah.
I think we've talked about pretty much all the main characters, but the one I want to talk about who was really kind of surprising was Heather Chrysler, who played Sarah, who is this is all I'll really say about it, is it's Rod's ex something, girlfriend, wife. We don't really know, I don't think. Just that they broke up a while ago. But that's a character that has, and I got to really tiptoe around stuff, has a lot going on. We learn a little bit about a very interesting job. We don't really find out what the deal is with that job. Is it something that she enjoys doing? Is it something that she has to do? We don't get the overblown kind of dramatic thing about what she has to do in her life as a consequence of her relationship with Rod, when he kind of gets to, quote unquote, just sit in the basement and play video games all day. I want to talk about what I'm dancing around here, but I really think people need to discover for themselves, because it's also something that, like a lot of things in this movie, we learn about over time.
Right. Yeah. And there's a great scene in the front porch that summarizes where they're at between the two of them, and they share a son, and that's
what I was trying to avoid.
All right. Well, okay. I mean,
they have a kid.
You were trying to avoid the other thing. Yeah, but
that
we'll
too.
avoid that.
Yes.
But I think that that's part of the conversation, and you know, it's something that he has a lot of heartbreak about. You know, hence the stowing himself away in the basement. But yeah, I thought that was kind of like it, and that's all that we would see from her character. But I like how Michael later on has kind of injected a nice little scene in kind of a montage of her again, because I think if it was just that front porch scene, I think it would be kind of not formulaic or not cliche, but it would be kind of I would say borderline those things. Okay, just because what Michael's doing there later on when we see her is okay. Once again, we're giving extra layer to who this person is. It's like I actually was surprised we then were revisiting that character again, or she was showing up again, because I thought that was it, that whole front porch scene, and then that's it. But what I liked is that, okay, well, there's more to this character than we think, and because I think if that's all we got was that front porch, then our mind would be like, oh, okay, yeah, I've seen this kind of character before.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And again, this is, I'm not asking for a sequel, but there are definitely other scenes that play out in my head, like what happened after this weekend, that I think speaks to the richness of what we did get in this, very, if I'll call it efficient, sounds like a terrible word, but it's an hour and a half long, but we get so much comedy and drama and heart and character shoved in there. We're going to talk about Jurassic Park 6
World, or whatever,
Jurassic World Dominion later on, and that movie is an hour longer than this, and it has not a 30-second of stuff to say that this movie does. So that'll go on the poster. Better than Jurassic World Dominion.
Well, I mean, he could do a link letter, and we could catch up with these characters 5-10 years from now, and he could call it Relatives or something. I don't know.
No, that's the James Cameron treatment. But no, I think that's enough of a tease. We've talked for 45 minutes about this movie, and hopefully folks will go out and check it out, and hopefully folks will come out to the various venues in Chicago where it's showing. It's playing right now. It's at the Siskel Center, and also coming up next Wednesday. Tell us what you're going to be doing on Wednesday night, David.
Yeah, so I will be at the Gene Siskel Film Center over there in State Street in Chicago, and Wednesday, June 15th, I'll be moderating a Q&A after a screening of Relative, and it's basically going to be a producers panel. The producers will be there, Aaron Wertheimer and Brian Anjan Higelke, of Chicago Film Project, and of course writer-director Michael Glover Smith will be there. Hopefully we'll have a full house, and I'm asking people I know, everybody I see, come join us, and hopefully open up some questions to the audience as well. And what about you? Do you feel like doing something like that?
Yeah, actually, I'm gonna come Wednesday and take it over. No. There's going to be actually a suburban expansion of Relative next weekend. So, David, yours is Wednesday the 15th. On Friday the 17th, I'm going to be at the Hollywood Boulevard Theater out in lovely Woodridge, Illinois, my old stomping grounds.
Yeah.
And I'm going to be hosting a screening of Relative along with a Q&A afterwards with Michael Glover Smith and actress Emily Lape, who plays Norma in the film.
Fantastic.
And I also, as I mentioned, she's a filmmaker in her own right. So I got to catch up with was it Mercy's Girl? Mercy's Girl.
Do it
beforehand. So yeah, I'll be eager to check that out. But so that's at 7:30 p.m. So tickets and information, all that stuff for both of those screenings, and anything else I can dig up, because I know there's other events happening in the next week and a half or so.
Yeah.
I'll post on in the description down below, so folks can check it out. Definitely, please come out and join us and support this movie. And if you are not familiar with Michael Smith's other films, definitely check them out. They are all worthwhile in some degrees. I've been kind of hard on his last film, but I'm in the definite minority because a lot of people love Rendezvous in Chicago. And we were actually on set for one of those vignettes a few years ago. So I'll also post a link to our interviews that we did from the set the same night we saw Deadpool 2, which was quite a double feature. But yeah. All right. Any closing words, Mr. Fowley?
No, I mean, I'm glad that we had this chance to talk about, it's not just that he's a local friend of ours, but it's whenever a film like this comes along, this is just like anything, we can review a blockbuster, but it doesn't really need our help. Whenever a movie comes along that we think maybe not a lot of people may know about, I'll speak for you and me. I think that we have the feeling, the urge to share that with others and make sure that other people know about movies like this that really have a great heart and soul about them.
Yeah, definitely. And it's been well documented on other live streams and podcasts that we've done. I am getting fed up with Hollywood movies and TV shows. So I think there's a lot more relative type coverage coming to this channel very soon. So yeah, I agree. This is something to support and to love, and to follow Michael Smith and whatever he's doing, because you think Chicago is known as the second city, but we've got a crop of really great local filmmakers who are going a long way to make this city shine and kind of give that Midwest character to the family drama, which is something I think that we need.
On that note, what I learned about that phrase, second city? It's not because, second to another city. When the Chicago fire obliterated Chicago, they called it the second city when they rebuilt it. That's where it comes from.
It's kind of like the windy city. I always thought it was because of the wind, but it was because of the
politicians,
the blowhard politicians. Yeah. So yeah, I learned something today, man. Thank you.
You're welcome.
But yeah, I feel like in the popular parlance, people think of this Chicago as a second city as like, it's not as good as New York.
Yep, exactly.
But it totally is. All right, man. Thank you very much. We'll be talking about other stuff coming up soon, but break a leg, not literally, when you host Relative next Wednesday at the Siskel Center. And yeah, we'll catch up more, man. Thank you.
Yeah, yourself as well. Thank you.
All right, bye.
Bye.